Hi everyone, Tam's here. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about gardening. Many of you that follow me on YouTube and Instagram know me for my paper crafting and my gardening journal, but I actually have a garden and several people have requested that I share more information about that garden. I have lived in Central Florida for about 13 years now. I'm not from here. I grew up in the Virginia-Carolina border area. Most of my family is in Virginia and some are in North Carolina. So that's the type of gardening that I grew up with. I was personally never ever interested in gardening until about 6 years ago. Honestly, I tried to avoid it. Most of my family are farmers, and I grew up with lots of women in my family that were excellent gardeners and they had beautiful gardens, but I, as a child, saw it as a ton of work and I didn't want anything to do with it. So I avoided it as much as possible. And I don't know what happened to me, but about 6 years ago, I can remember exactly when it happened. I just all of a sudden became overwhelmed with this urge to design a little garden bed in a certain area of my yard. I could visualize it, I could see it, and I immediately started working on this project. And ever since then, I have been bit by the garden bug. I have been obsessed with gardening. So I don't know if it's just a delayed reaction and it's been in my blood forever, or if it just came to me at a point in my life. But it's here, and I've been playing around with gardening for the past 6 years now. I'm gonna put in some clips of what my garden looked like before, and this is the back of my house. I did absolutely nothing to the back of my house for years. I was not interested, nothing. So those of you that have seen photos on Instagram of my garden, you may be shocked to see what it used to look like, but I thought it might be helpful for you to see a before. And then, because so many people have asked for more information on my gardening adventures here in Central Florida, I thought I'd give you like a monthly update on what I've done, what I've been doing, what's blooming, what I've learned, and what's happening in the garden. So like I said, I did not grow up in Florida, so I did not know about gardening in Florida, and there has been a lot to learn. Florida has lots of pros and cons. I've had to learn how to get used to the rainy season, so it rains almost every day just for a little bit, certain parts of the year. Other parts of the year it doesn't. We don't really go through a hard winter. We have a period when things are somewhat dormant, but they're still green and blooming. You can grow anything just about in Florida. And if you want very quick satisfaction, or just want to try something for the heck of it, you will learn very quickly in Florida if it's going to work for you or not. So for a gardener, to me, it is heaven because I can try so many things. And I've been fortunate that the biggest inspiration outside of my mom and grandmother and great aunts, I had someone move in to my neighborhood about 7 years ago. It's my neighbor. You've seen pictures of her garden. I am constantly sharing my cocktails in the garden. That is her backyard and her garden, but she has been my mentor because she is, I think, 6th generation Floridian. She knows everything about Florida gardening. She has been gardening for a very long time, and she knows a lot of things that you don't, and has planted and worked with a lot of plants that you don't typically see in the average yard here in Florida. One of the things I did not want, I see some plants I see in almost every single yard here in Florida. It's not a whole lot of variety, but when you go to like a public garden and you see all the things that you can grow in Florida, your mind just kind of goes, whoa, and you just start thinking of all the different things you can do so you can get out of control very quickly. So she taught me a lot about plants that I was not seeing, that I was not aware of, and really helped me start shaping things up a bit. Now I'm going to insert a few clips of what my garden looks like today. And I'm just going to focus on the backyard for now because that's typically where I do all my experimentation, all my learning, and then anything I feel really good about, I'd move it to the front yard. So I've actually done more work in my backyard. So I'm going to show you just what it looks like today. And here's a little video footage. Now I'm going to talk about where I am this month in March. As we're coming to the end of the month, I want to share with you just some of my favorite things about gardening. Number one, orchids. Oh, I've always loved orchids, and I always felt like you had to have a greenhouse, and they were so delicate, and you had to work really hard to keep them alive and all these things. But I found that orchids are very happy in Florida, and they do not require too much care at all. So I'm going to show you some clips of my courtyard garden. This was one of my first experiments. I actually started experimenting with orchids, believe it or not, because I saw my brother, who is now in South Florida, he was growing some orchids just in his little patio. And orchids really are the things that drew me in. I love them to pieces. I have had a great deal of luck with them, I feel like, and I just love them. And I've actually had people give me their family's orchids because they didn't think they could take care of them. So what's great about March is some of my favorite types of orchids are in full bloom. I have orchids that bloom several times a year. I have orchids that only bloom once a year. And this is the time of year when they all are just bursting with color, and I really enjoy it. Now, what do I do in January and February since you've missed those 2 months of the year? I really don't do a whole lot in January and February. Number one, we typically will have a week or so where you'll have a night or two where the temperatures will drop really low. So I usually wait for that period to end, and then I spend early to mid-February just really cutting back really hard. I have some electric trimmers, and I have to cut the jasmine, the plumbago, everything, thryallis, and I really cut it back hard so it can be ready for that spring growth. The other thing that happens end of February and early March, pollen, that's when we get our pollen. I mean, it really starts to just come down and cover everything. So I wait for that to fall, and then we blow the leaves and clean up the pollen and all that and start to expose all the pathways, because every couple of years I have to replenish the pathways, and I've made a lot of mistakes with materials. So this year I'm actually going to try gravel instead of river rock. So that's a big project that's coming up. So I spent this March really just cleaning up beds, defining beds, using the weed eater quite a bit, and thinking about what I want to do next in these beds. The other thing I do in March is, because Florida is so nice, I usually have potted plants all year round. And, occasionally you got to take them out of the pot. I try to pot things that will go in the ground as well. I love pentas. I learned about pentas when moving to Florida. So I will take those out of the pot and then find a home for them in the garden. I'm constantly sticking things into the garden. My neighbor tells me to treat it like, she's an artist, and she says you treat it like a palette and you dab the color in. And what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't do well, you pull it out, or you get tired of it, you pull it out. Haven't spent a whole lot of money because pentas only cost a couple of bucks. I put them into the pots. They get beautiful in the pots, and then I put them in the ground and I add a little pop of color. So that's one of the things I've been doing this month. The other thing is growing vegetables and herbs here in Florida. That has been such a learning curve. I did participate with my neighbors in a little community garden project, and I'll put some images in. This happened several years ago, and from that experiment I learned there were a lot of things that I grew up with that I could not necessarily have very good luck with here in Florida. So I've really had to experiment a lot with vegetables and herbs and how to grow them, the ground versus raised beds versus pots. And what I've come to a conclusion on is there's only a few things that I feel like I can handle right now, and I like to put them in pots. One of my favorite inspirations is Aaron Bertelsen. If you're not familiar with him, he's actually the veg gardener for Great Dixter over in England, which is one of my favorite gardens. I'm a big Christopher Lloyd fan. I have many of his books. But Aaron had this book come out last year, Grow Fruit and Vegetables in Pots. So I've been playing around with that, and I've had great luck with cherry tomatoes, peppers, and herbs in pots. Herbs do pretty well in the spring here in the ground because it's not the rainy season, and most herbs that I prefer they don't like too much water, but when the rainy season comes, they just don't do well in the water with all the rain at all for some reason. So putting them in the ground has not been a good thing for me. The only thing I have in the ground right now is some rosemary. I love rosemary, and so far it's been doing okay. I put it in the hottest area of my yard, and it seems happy, and we'll see what happens this year when we go through another rainy season. But I think I've finally got it positioned. Well, it will be happy. All other herbs I'm growing in pots. The other thing that I love to do this time of year is I have a growing collection of gardening books, and I'm slowly building a little garden library. And each year about this time, I become obsessed with certain gardeners and garden writers. And this year it's been Rosemary Very. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but there's tons of books by her. And I ordered several used books that were written by Rosemary Very, and I've been playing around with looking through the images and reading and looking at her designs, and I just find it so inspirational. Yes, most of my favorite garden writers are British, and hello, we're in Florida, so it's hard, but if you haven't figured out, I'm a big fan of the cottage garden look. And what I'm really trying to do here in my little Central Florida garden is create a cottage garden with Florida-friendly and sustainable plants. So we will see what I can do, but I'm happy to share with you each month where we are, what I've been working on, projects. I've been told that you're interested in this. So I hope this first video was helpful. And if you have any questions whatsoever, while this isn't a gardening channel, I would love to share what I have learned about growing and gardening here in Florida. And if you are from Florida and you have some tips, or if you see something in a video and you want to give me some feedback, please, I'm so open and ready to learn. So thank you so much for asking and being interested in this. And if you do not follow me on Instagram, I do share a lot of photos of the garden over on Instagram. So be sure to follow me over there if you want to know more or see more. So thanks for joining me. Bye.